Okay, so you should be done with that graphic organizer that kind of analyzes what changed and stayed the same between the Byzantine and Ottoman empires. So one major change I think is toleration under the Sultan, right? We learned about that, how the Ottoman Empire was much more tolerant. Remember, the Byzantine Empire was Orthodox Christian, so they were not as tolerant, very intolerant of other religions. So I think that's an important change. Now remember, as time would go on, though, less toleration would develop in the Ottoman Empire, and that would lead to a decline economically. So a big change would be, obviously, Islam would become the dominant religion of the region, where when the Byzantines were in power, it was Orthodox Christian. A sultan, obviously, was the term of the ruler in the Ottoman Empire as opposed to the emperor. The Ottoman Empire was also, I think, more secular than the Byzantine Empire. I think that's another change, right? Under Constantine or Justinian, it was a theocratic government, right? A government where the ruler was both the religious leader and obviously the political leader, where the Sultan was not necessarily a religious leader. Law, the people of the Ottoman Empire followed Sharia law, as opposed to more of a traditional law system, right? So laws were more tied to religious behavior, as opposed, it's kind of an ethical or a moral code as opposed to more of a legal code. So what continued? Obviously trade, right? Both empires were very effective trading empires, right? Istanbul or what was Constantinople were major cities along the Silk Roads. There was still a lot of promotion of art and literature. They continued to promote, learn, and discuss Greek philosophy in those coffee houses down the road. And architecture, right, continued to be something that was important in both empires. St. Sophia changed from an Orthodox Christian church to a mosque, right? So the physical architecture stayed the same, but the purpose did change. So great example of an essay topic, right? What changed and continued. All right, so let's talk about the next gunpowder empire, the Safavids. So the Safavid Empire would be right here, kind of, the old Persian Empire. Probably, back in the day, it would be part of both the Umayyad and Abbasid empires. It's now a smaller Islamic empire. No navy. Not really, a major military power, mostly because they did not have a navy or natural defenses like mountain regions. They did have to have a strong army, and they did. So Ismail would be the first early ruler. He conquers Persia, which today would be Iran, and he uses Shia Islam to unify. So the Ottoman Empire was Sunni. The Safavid Empire would be Shia, and that's very important because that's going to lead to hostility back then between the Ottomans and even today. There's a lot of tension between Sunni Islamic countries and Shia countries. So Saudi Arabia would be Sunni. They do have a lot of conflict with Iran, which today would be a Shia country. So that's still a major issue going forward. The Safavid Empire was a theocratic empire, unlike the Ottoman Empire. So Sharia law was still important to both, but the leaders of the Safavid Empire were known as, or the ruler was a Shah, and he was considered the religious leader in addition to being the political leader. Remember, a sultan was the ruler of the Ottoman Empire, but he wasn't really a religious leader. He was Muslim, but he didn't dictate or push religious policy like the Shah did. Kind of the first Shah would be Shah Abbas. I wouldn't really be too concerned with remembering him. Just understand, though, that again, the Shahs controlled both religious policy and political policy. That's important. Tehran would be the capital of the Safavid Empire. Right over here. Today, it's the capital of Iran. So again, the Safavid Empire would definitely be, modern day Iran, where the Ottoman Empire was part, mostly. If you look over here, quite a bit of Iraq and Syria. Okay, again, today Iraq is a Sunni nation or dominated by Sunni, and they still have conflict with Iran, a Shia nation. Tehran had beautiful gardens, pools. Again, architecture was unique. Important right here, the Strait of Hormuz. This is the Persian Gulf, very important geographical part of the world today. A lot of Navy ships are there protecting ships going in and out of this region. The Strait of Hormuz kind of, this little narrow area, is important to access to this Gulf, and then obviously the Arabian Sea. England would play a big role in keeping this Gulf open going forward. But again, nothing major here. Just understand that architecture and art was important to the Safavids as well. Okay, and again, they're ruled by a Shah who was a theocratic ruler. All right, so by 1760, the Safavid Empire begins to decline. Excessive military spending, excessive, spending by the Shah, and falling tax revenues will contribute to kind of economic problems. And they too will have a rebellion. A Sunni living in Afghanistan, which would be right over here, Afghanistan, that rebellion will limit tax collection, and that's going to again hurt the economy of the Safavid Empire. And eventually the Ottomans and the Russians would seize territory. So not an empire that's was long lasting, that's for sure. But again, what you want to focus on is this was a Shia empire that was ruled by a Shah. And again, the Shia empire or the Safavid will be in conflict with the Ottoman Empire. All right, the third gunpowder empire would be the Munghal. Very important. This would be India, northern India mostly. The first ruler would be Babur, who was the descendant of Tamerlane, who we mentioned earlier. 1530s, this empire will emerge. Now, you have to know this guy, Akbar. He is the great ruler of the Mughal Empire, and what he did is he helped create a more efficient government with laws. People would actually appeal to him for judgment and lawsuit. He, too, established more of a Muslim religion, Sunni most likely. He also created, positions in government called zamindars. Very important to remember this. They were tax collectors. They oversaw construction projects, water supply projects, but they would also skim off the top of taxes, and they built their own private armies. So again, he does create an efficient government with lots of positions, but these zamindars did kind of consolidate power on their own. All right, what Akbar is most known for is his toleration. He gave land to Hindus. Remember, India was both a Hindu and a Muslim nation. So Akbar didn't interfere in that. So land was allocated to Muslims, Hindus, even Sikhs. We'll talk about Sikhs in a little bit. He funded a Catholic church, so Christians were also able to practice in this region. He tried to mediate conflicts between a lot of these groups, which was important. He even gave Hindus government jobs. So it didn't really matter your religion. You could basically be a noble. You could be a fairly powerful figure under his rule. He had wives who were Hindu. So again, under his rule, there was a lot of access to noble positions for non-Muslims. He even invited Catholic priests to Delhi to discuss religion. So again, a really important person to remember, but mostly for his promotion of toleration. Okay, so Akbar also was known for his encouragement or development of learning, art, and architecture, and probably the most famous architectural feat of his rule was the Taj Mahal. You've probably heard of it, one of the 7 wonders of the world. You can definitely notice the Islamic architectural characteristics, the domes, the towers, the arches. Another interesting action he took would be to end childhood marriages and the practice of sati. That was actually referenced earlier in some of our chapters, where widows would kill themselves when their husbands died. I think that's a great example of kind of the gender roles that were in practice in India. But he's going to try to move to end that. Another important piece would be he kind of establishes, obviously not a new religion, but he's looking to kind of modify Islam, and he pursues or supports the practice of din ilahi. Not sure how to pronounce it. Din ilahi, maybe that's I think that's an I actually. It's another word for divine faith, and he sought to bring Hinduism and Islam together. So it's not. We're going to learn about Sikhism in a second. Sikhism is another attempt to do that, a more successful attempt. But he does try to kind of, again, bring different groups together, and in this case, actually have a faith of two different religions. One of the richest and best governed states in the world, he was very effective. Trade flourished under his rule. Arab traders played a big role. Indian traders did not sail across the ocean. They were more obviously merchants living in India, like in a place like Calcutta. But the Arab traders are the ones that kind of promoted the back and forth. But obviously the people of India benefited from that trade. What was being sent out? Textiles, spices, and precious stones. And the banking system of India was growing. Remember, the banking system, or the modern banking system, emerged in China with the flying cash, but India is going to develop a banking system as well. All right, so we talked about Sikhism, or we've mentioned Sufism in the past, and you have to be able to kind of explain it. And these are alternative Islamic religions. So Sufism, if you recall, was something that was developing in North Africa, especially in Egypt. And it's this idea, it's the idea that an individual could experience God without the intercession of others. And it's kind of like Protestantism, where there was less reliance on the imam or the religious leader, and more of a reliance, or even the Quran, and more of a reliance on your own relationship with God. Sufism played a huge role in spreading Islam to Asia. So it was the Sufi missionaries that were moving into Indonesia and parts of India. So that's a unique feature to Sufism. Also, there was a very special emphasis on the teacher. The teacher was the most important leader here, and he was a source of veneration, ancestor veneration. So not so much the priest, but it was more of the teacher of Sufism that was the higher up, in a sense. Also unique to Sufism would be the rhythmic chanting, music, and dance rituals. So that's definitely a characteristic that's fairly easy to remember, and it attracted rural converts. Obviously Islam was attractive to all members of the poor, but Sufism was very attractive to people in rural areas. Sikhism is different, but it does have a connection to Islam. So this is going to emerge in India. It rejects the caste system, right? So it was attractive to the people of the lower classes. And what it was is it's an attempt to connect or combine Islam and Hindu beliefs. Again, it's kind of what Akbar was trying to do, but Sikhism is an actual religious faith that does emerge going forward. So definitely, they're different, but again, it's an example of Islam changing a bit, right? All right, so what were some changes to Hinduism? So even though, Akbar and the Mughal Empire was Islam, Hinduism was still there, right? It was tolerated, but it's going to change as well. And there was going to be less of an emphasis on the Brahmin priests, kind of what we saw with Sufism. Also, the epic story of Ramayana is going to be retold in Hindu language. And that's important because now people who didn't have the ability to understand the Vedic languages, maybe a lack of education, could now understand these epic Vedic stories. And they go way back, right, to the beginnings of Hinduism. Kind of similar to the Bible being translated into local languages or the vernacular in Europe with the printing press, or how Buddhist text was then rewritten in Korean script. So basically, because of the story being retold in Hindu, all levels of society could better understand and practice Hinduism. All right, so what led to the decline of all three empires? A very common theme, European imperialism. European nations eventually took over these regions, mostly for trade reasons, right? The British East India Company played a big role. Harem politics, right? We talked about that. Assassinations were common by family members. The wives had a lot of influence. Weak and corrupt leadership after Akbar, especially in the Mughal Empire. Expensive armies, so there was a lot of economic decline because of high taxes and wasteful spending, and religious differences and a lack of tolerance was very important. You're going to have conflict going forward between Hindus and Muslims in India. Gandhi was a Hindu, and he was murdered by someone who didn't agree with his Hindu beliefs, or didn't like what was happening in India. And then there was obviously and continues to be conflict between Shia and Sunni in this part of the world today, right? So that's it, guys.